Opportunities in the Marketplace by Victor Yup and Doris Mock. Chapter 24. Paul and Barnabas. Goodbye does not mean forever. Acts chapter 15, verses 35 to 40. One of the most unedifying church fights made public was the Ethiopian and Egyptian Coptic Church in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, in nowhere more sacred than Jerusalem, visited by hundreds of thousands of pilgrims and tourists every year. A long-running dispute over ownership of the site several years ago over the rooftop monastery held up repairs paid by the government. Disputes are not uncommon, particularly over who has the authority to carry out repairs. The latest row was over the ladder above the church entrance that has been there since 19th century. Although the Ethiopian monks have lived there for more than 200 years, the Copts were in overall control of the monastery after losing many of their rights within the main church. That's certainly how the Coptic Church interprets the status quo, the controversial 1852 decree issued by the then Ottoman rulers of Jerusalem to put an end to the arguments among the church's various claimants. Coptic and Ethiopian monks have come to blows in the past, but they are not the only ones who have allowed tensions to boil over. Fights between monks from different sects in the sepulchre are not uncommon, and passions run high, particularly on important holy days. The Israeli government says it will pay for the work to be carried out only if the Copts and Ethiopians can resolve their differences. But after decades of hostility, neither side is rushing to compromise. The church in Antioch is the most quoted model of the early church, but one fine day, there was trouble in paradise between two of the closest and brightest leaders there. The church had a rich and long history, as early as Pentecost. Nicholas, a proselyte of Antioch, was one of the 7 deacons of the early church, Acts 6:5. When persecution arose, Stephen traveled as far as Antioch to preach the word, Acts 11:19. And when a great number of people in Antioch believed and turned unto the Lord, the church in Jerusalem sent Barnabas to Antioch, Acts 11:22. Barnabas, in turn, brought Paul to Antioch, where they spent a whole year together and taught much people there, where the disciples were called Christians for the first time, Acts 11:26. It is impossible to agree on all things between a husband and a wife, a parent and a child, and 2 best friends. But what happens when 2 good friends and partners disagree on the job? When is conflict acceptable, and when is it not? Why is it better to heal a relationship before it worsens? First, appreciate the differences. Acts 15. 35 to 38. But Paul and Barnabas remained in Antioch, where they and many others taught and preached the word of the Lord. Sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns where we preached the word of the Lord and see how they are doing." Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them, but Paul did not think it wise to take him because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. Chelsea Football Club's former coach Andrea Villas-Boas, at a young 16 years of age, wrote to legendary English national team coach Sir Bobby Robson, discussing which players to start with data for support. The young boy was offered a trainee position with the youth's coaching staff, later enrolled him to earn his coaching badges at a young 17. Villas-Boas said, "Bobby gave me the stimulus to start my career. I was planning to go into sports journalism, but when Bobby came to Porto in 1994, he moved into my building and I had the opportunity to confront him about my club, how they were doing, and the way the team played. Only an open-minded person like Bobby would accept such arrogance from a young kid. He liked my passion, so helped me to enroll at Lilleshall to take my FA coaching qualifications. I shouldn't really have been there because I was too young, but Bobby smoothed the way. He also arranged for me to do my Scottish qualifications in Largs and spend some time at Ipswich with George Burley. There are 6 references to the Paul and Barnabas team in the Bible, thrice in chapter 13 verse 43, 46, and 50, and 3 in the climactic chapter 15 verse 2 twice, and 22. And verse 22 is the last we hear of the Paul and Barnabas dream team. 7 times they are the Barnabas and Saul/Paul team. Acts 11:30, 12:25, 13:2, 7, 14:14, 15:12, and 25. They were both leaders in their own right, despite unsubstantiated suggestions and summations that Paul overtook Barnabas as a leader. No individual or team had more references associated to the phrase, the word of the Lord, Acts 13:48, 49, 15:35, and 36, or preached the word of the Lord, verse 35, its only occurrence in the Bible. There was never a duo, team, or partnership like Paul and Barnabas, but something went wrong. And what a sudden, sad, swift, strange, and severe breakup it was. After a time spent with the church headquarters in Antioch, Paul had an exciting and excellent plan to revisit the believers in every city. From their last missionary journey, they have preached the word of the Lord. But things went awry, horribly wrong, and beyond control. The verb wanted, verse 37, wanted to take John, is softer than its translation in other verses, including consult, Luke 14:31, take counsel, John 11:53, determine, Acts 15:37, mind, Acts 27:39, and purpose, 2 Corinthians 1:17. Barnabas gave time, thought, and tact into it. It was deliberate, dutiful, and decisive of him, somewhat natural, normal, and nurturing to him. After all, Barnabas and Mark were cousins, Colossians 4:10, and believers often gather at the house of Mark's mother Mary for prayer, Acts 12:12. The future author of the Gospel of Mark was from a devout home, minus a durable heart. The infinitive to take, sumparalambano, in verses 35 and 36 is crucial because it is a replica of the infinitive to take, John, from their first journey, Acts 12:25, together. The phrase to take will never appear again in the Bible apart from the journeys and adventures of Paul, Barnabas, and Mark, Acts 12:25, 15:35-36. Mark had departed them on their first missionary journey to act as their minister, Acts 12:25 and 13:5, but he controversially returned to Jerusalem for an unknown reason, Acts 13:13. He was a blast from the past, a link to the past, an echo of the past, but a thing of the past, a memory of the past, and a remnant of the past. The special time, special place, and special friendship was burdensome, blemished, and buried. In contrast to Barnabas' soft approach was Paul's strong stand. The verb think wise, verse 38, can also be translated much stricter as think worthy, Luke 7:7, think good, Acts 15:38, desire, Acts 28:22, and count worthy, 2 Thessalonians 1:11. Barnabas' fierce determination was dampened by Paul's firm characterization. Barnabas' decision was personal and relational, but Paul's decision was moral and ethical. On Paul's part, there was no room for lapses, laxities, and liabilities. Second, allow for discussion. Acts 15, verse 39. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus. For attractive lips, speak words of kindness. For lovely eyes, seek out the good in people. For a slim figure, share your food with the hungry. For beautiful hair, let a child run his fingers through it once a day. For poise, walk with the knowledge you'll never walk alone. By Sam Levinson. The difference of opinion turned into a sharp disagreement. Verse 39, parozusmos, which in its other occurrence in the Bible is translated as provoke. Hebrews 10:24. It is derived from the preposition para, which means alongside, and the next part of the word to mean swift, sharp, or stir. The English equivalent paroxysm is defined as a sudden violent emotion or action. Outburst, Merriam-Webster. Tensions were high, tolerance was low, and tempers were frayed. The verb parted company has the away or out, apo, preposition to it, and it occurs one other time in the Bible. The heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together. Revelation 6:14. The preposition apo means out of sight, out of reach, and out of touch. The derived verb without the preposition is used for separation of marriage. Matthew 19:6. Separation from the love of Christ. Romans 8:35. Separation of servant and master. Philemon 15. And separation from sinners. Hebrews 7:26. So it was a serious, sharp, and stormy issue and matter. Barnabas was a giver, an encourager, Acts 4:36, and mentor, but now the mentor fell out with his mentee and split up over a new mentee. As was his nature, Barnabas was so friendly, forgiving, forbearing, and faithful, Acts 4:37. He had discovered, groomed, and partnered Paul, Acts 9:27 and 11:22 previously, so the teacher, tutor, and trainer in him could not bring himself to forsake and forced out Mark when the young man was at a crossroad turning the corner. Barnabas' instincts were proven right because Mark came into his own, became a gospel writer, and was profitable in ministry. 2 Timothy 4:11, praised by Paul himself. The split was so abrupt that Barnabas and Mark sailed away seemingly without the blessings of the church, which was strange, sad, and shocking because he was the first renowned leader sent by the church in Jerusalem. Acts 11:22. Cyprus was a good choice because it was Barnabas' home. Acts 4:36. Further, Mark began his ministry there. Acts 13:5. And the church had many leaders and believers. Acts 11:19-21. It was a familiar, friendly, and fruitful place. Third, answer the disruption. Acts 15:40-41. But Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord. He went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. One day in the South Pacific, a Navy ship captain saw smoke coming from a hut on an uncharted island. Upon arriving at the shore, they were met by a shipwreck survivor. He said, "I am so glad you're here. I've been alone on this island for more than 5 years." The captain replied, "If you are all alone on the island, why do I see 3 huts?" The survivor said, "Oh, well, I live in one and go to church in another." "What about the 3rd hut?" asked the captain. "That's where I used to go to church." The choice of Silas was inspired in many ways. Silas was chief man among the brethren, Acts 15:22, a prophet and a teacher, Acts 15:32, and a pioneer in Antioch. The course ahead was more daunting and difficult than the previous journey. Jail was awaiting them, Acts 16:23. The time was longer, 2 years for the first compared to 3 years for the second. The places were further to Macedonia, and the Jews were angrier, Acts 20 verse 3 and 19. Silas was as strong, solid, and sacrificial as Paul. The team was always Paul and Silas, Acts 16:19, 25, 29, and 17 verse 4 from now on, never Silas and Paul. Surprisingly, unlike Barnabas, Acts 13:46, Silas never said a word in the Bible. A website calculated the difference between the travels of first missionary journey with Paul, Barnabas, and Mark and the second missionary journey with Paul and Silas. The first journey was in 53 days over 1,581 miles, and the second was 100 days over 3,050 days. The second was the longest of 3 journeys, with the third clocking in at 92 days. There were 10 cities in the second missionary journey to 17 in the second journey. There were more treachery, persecution, and danger. Silas endured imprisonment, beatings, and his feet fastened in the stocks. Acts 16:23-24. Silas' leadership, independence, and experience were invaluable because for a time he had temporary custody of young Timothy when Paul sailed to Athens by himself, Acts 17:14-15, meeting 2 cities later at Corinth, but after bypassing Athens, Acts 17:15, Athens, 18 verse 1, Corinth. Timothy was a concern because of what happened to Mark in the first journey. The new team was now Silas and Timothy, Acts 17:10, 14, 15, and 18 verse 5 in Paul's absence. Silas was a supervisor, support, and stalwart to Timothy. Conclusion. There is no stopping or slowing the word of God or the work of God. The Church of God overcame mistreatment, misunderstanding, and mistakes. In church history, the Word of God increased, Acts 6:7, grew and multiplied, Acts 12:24, grew mightily and prevailed, Acts 19 verse 20. Since we have one God, 1 Corinthians 8:6, one Lord, Ephesians 4:5, one Master, Matthew 23:8, one Spirit, Ephesians 4:4, and one husband, 2 Corinthians 11:2, let us be in one accord, Acts 4:24, of one heart and of one soul, Acts 4:29, one body, Romans 12:4, be like-minded of the same love, Philippians 2:2. Let us stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel, Philippians 1:27. Have you allowed differences and disagreements with others to divide the church, dampen the hearts, or derail the gospel? How can you be an agent of reconciliation and restoration? Can you help to bury hatchets, build bridges, and bind wounds? Bible study questions. 1. Who were Paul and Barnabas, and what roles do they have in the Antioch church? Verse 35. 2. How did the 2 men collaborate in the past? Verse 36. 3. What did Barnabas intend to do? What attitude did he have? Verse 37. 4. How did Paul view Mark? What attitude did he have? Verse 38. 5. How did Paul and Barnabas resolve the differences? How was the relationship affected? Verse 39. 6. How did the brethren respond to the new team of Paul and Silas? How was the church affected? Verse 40. 7. How did the new team do? What came out of the dispute? Verse 41. Personal application. 1. In serving, how do we distinguish between different opinions, viewpoints, and way of doing things rather than spiritual differences? Could we mistake difference of opinion as a personal attack and seek to eliminate it? 2. When you conflict with other people, have you ever tried to deal with it in a loving way? How did you feel at that time? How did the other party react? 3. Who has wronged you in your life? How do you treat them? How is your relationship now? 4. Do you feel that some people are not worthy of God's forgiveness? Is there such a person? 5. Who do you look down on or despise? Do you mention them in your prayers? 6. How do we make choices with Christ's love in conflict? 7. How has this lesson helped you as a disciple of Christ to understand your role, identity, participation, influence, and relationship with others in the marketplace?